My beloved child. Before you continue, pause for just a moment. This message did not arrive by accident. Out of countless voices, countless distractions, and countless moments that could have taken your attention elsewhere, you are here now. There is a reason your heart slowed down long enough to hear these words. Do not rush away. Something has been unfolding beyond what your eyes could see, and what you are about to hear was meant to find you at precisely this moment. I know you have been searching for answers that no ordinary conversation could provide. There have been quiet questions living inside your spirit, questions you never fully spoke aloud because even you were uncertain how to explain them. Yet heaven has heard every silent thought, every restless night, every whispered prayer, every moment you looked toward the sky hoping that somehow the silence would finally speak. Listen carefully, because this message is part of a fictional inspirational story, yet its emotional journey may encourage you to reflect on hope, patience, and love in your own life. Something happened last night that changed the direction of two hearts in ways neither one expected. While the world slept, while streets became quiet and windows grew dark, an invisible turning point began to unfold. Your soulmate found themselves standing face to face with emotions they could no longer avoid. They believed they had buried those feelings beneath responsibilities, distractions, and unanswered questions. But what is buried inside the heart often rises when everything else becomes silent. Stay with this message. Do not leave too quickly. There is more waiting to be revealed than you imagine. Your soulmate thought the evening would pass like every other evening. They expected ordinary conversations, familiar routines, and another night that would disappear into memory without meaning. But heaven often moves when human plans come to an end. Sometimes the greatest turning points never announce themselves with loud voices. Sometimes they arrive as a single unexpected moment that changes everything afterward. As darkness settled outside, they found themselves remembering something they had tried not to remember. It was not merely a face. It was not only a name. It was a feeling. A strange peace mixed with longing. An invisible thread pulling gently upon the deepest part of their heart. They could not explain why. They tried to ignore it. They distracted themselves. They turned toward ordinary things. Yet every attempt only brought the feeling back stronger than before. Have you ever wondered why certain memories refuse to disappear? Why some people remain present inside the soul long after logic says they should be forgotten? There are moments when heaven allows remembrance not to create pain, but to awaken purpose. Last night became one of those moments. Your soulmate realized they had spent far too much time listening to fear instead of truth. Fear whispered that waiting was pointless. Fear suggested silence was safer than honesty. Fear convinced them that hiding emotions would somehow protect their heart. But fear has never spoken the final word. And that realization changed something. Do not skip ahead in your thoughts. The next part of this story matters. For a long time they believed they understood their own heart. Yet last night exposed a truth they had never fully accepted. Beneath every distraction was a question they could no longer escape. What if the person I keep thinking about is not a coincidence? That question echoed through the quiet hours. Again. And again. And again. Each time it returned, it became harder to silence. Meanwhile, you may have noticed small changes around your own life without recognizing their significance. Perhaps your attention has been drawn toward unusual memories. Perhaps certain songs seemed strangely familiar. Perhaps ordinary moments carried unexpected emotion. Whether or not such moments hold deeper meaning, they often remind us to pay closer attention to our own hearts. Nothing truly meaningful grows without patience. Nothing deeply beautiful is built in one evening. Yet every remarkable story begins with one unforgettable night. Last night became that night for them. They looked toward the window. The stars appeared brighter than usual. The breeze carried unusual stillness. For the first time in many months they stopped running from their own emotions. Silence became their teacher. Reflection became their companion. Hope quietly returned. My child, people often believe that extraordinary moments must look dramatic. Yet heaven frequently works through stillness. A peaceful realization can redirect a life more powerfully than 1,000 loud arguments. As the night continued, something unexpected interrupted their thoughts. Not with thunder. Not with fear. Not with confusion. Instead, they experienced a profound clarity unlike anything they had felt before. They remembered a conversation from long ago. At first it seemed ordinary. Simple words. Simple laughter. Simple kindness. But now they understood that those small moments carried greater weight than they had realized at the time. It is often only after time passes that people understand the true value of moments they once considered ordinary. Do not lose focus now. The story is only beginning. Their heart became unexpectedly emotional. Not because someone forced them. Not because circumstances demanded it. But because truth has a quiet power. Truth gently removes every excuse until only honesty remains. They asked themselves questions they had avoided for far too long. What have I been protecting? What have I been delaying? What if love requires courage instead of certainty? Those questions remained unanswered. Yet asking them changed everything. Sometimes transformation begins long before solutions appear. Sometimes the courage to ask honest questions becomes the first miracle. Hours continued passing. The night became deeper. Everything around them appeared unchanged. Yet inside, an entirely different world was awakening. They found an old memory they had nearly forgotten. Not an object of magical significance. Not a sign demanding belief. Simply something that reminded them of a chapter they once believed had ended. Holding that memory in their hands, they smiled. Then they became quiet again. Then they smiled once more. Hope returned little by little. Have you noticed how hope rarely arrives all at once? It usually begins as the smallest light. Barely visible. Almost fragile. Yet once welcomed, it grows stronger with every honest step. Stay until the end of this message. Something important is still hidden. Your soulmate began realizing that every attempt to ignore their emotions had only made them stronger. Every distraction eventually faded. Every excuse eventually became smaller than the truth waiting beneath it. They stopped pretending everything was fine. For the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine a different future. Not one built upon fear. Not one controlled by regret. A future shaped by honesty. That vision surprised them. Because it included someone they thought they had already left behind emotionally. The realization was gentle. Unexpected. Deeply personal. No one else could see it. Yet it changed the atmosphere of the entire night. Meanwhile, heaven continued watching quietly. Not forcing. Not rushing. Simply allowing each heart to grow through its own journey. Patience is never wasted. Every meaningful season has its own timing. Every seed grows beneath the surface before anyone notices new life. Remember this whenever waiting feels difficult. Some answers are preparing themselves long before they arrive. The night reached its quietest hour. Most people would have been asleep. Instead, your soulmate found themselves unable to ignore what was happening inside. They closed their eyes. They whispered a simple prayer. Nothing elaborate. Only honesty. Sometimes honesty becomes the most beautiful prayer a person can offer. They admitted confusion. They admitted longing. They admitted hope. And in admitting those things, they discovered unexpected peace. Not every answer arrived immediately. Yet peace arrived first. That peace mattered more than they understood. Because peace prepares the heart to recognize truth when it finally appears. Stay with me. The next revelation is even more important. As morning slowly approached, they believed the most emotional part of the night had already passed. They were mistaken. One final moment remained. One unexpected discovery. One quiet realization. It seemed insignificant at first. Almost too ordinary to matter. Yet within seconds everything looked different. They noticed something connected to you. Not through certainty or supernatural proof, but through a deeply personal reminder that stirred emotions they could no longer dismiss. It was enough to make them pause completely. Their heartbeat quickened. Their thoughts became clearer. Every reason for remaining silent suddenly felt smaller than the desire to understand what their heart had been trying to say all along. For several long moments they simply stood there. Breathing. Thinking. Remembering. Smiling. Wondering. Then something happened that they never expected themselves to do. Their hands slowly reached toward something they had avoided touching for a very long time. The moment their fingers came close, everything changed. But what they found, and why they now feel they must explain what happened last night, is a story that has only just begun. The moment their fingers came close, time seemed to stand still. It was as though the noise of the entire world stepped back to allow one quiet truth to be heard. They hesitated, not because they were afraid of what they might discover, but because they sensed that once this moment passed, nothing inside them would ever return to the way it had been before. Some moments divide life into two chapters, the chapter before understanding, and the chapter after it. Last night became that dividing line. Do not leave this message now. Stay with these words until the very end. Every revelation is leading somewhere greater, and what is about to unfold is something your heart has been waiting to hear. With a slow breath, your soulmate finally uncovered what they had hidden from themselves for so long. It was not a mysterious object or an unbelievable event. It was something far more powerful, a collection of memories they had refused to revisit because they believed those memories would only reopen old emotions. Yet instead of pain, those memories carried warmth. Instead of regret, they carried clarity. Every smile they had tried to forget returned with greater meaning. Every kind word echoed louder than before. Every moment they once called ordinary suddenly appeared extraordinary. They sat quietly, unable to move. Their heart was speaking louder than their thoughts. Logic suggested that they should close everything, put it away, and continue living as they always had. But something within refused to let them turn away. They realized that ignoring the truth had become far more exhausting than facing it. There are seasons when people spend more energy running from hope than embracing it. They convince themselves that silence is wisdom, when in reality silence is only fear wearing a gentle disguise. Last night your soulmate recognized that disguise. They saw how many decisions had been influenced by hesitation instead of honesty. They understood how often they had chosen certainty over courage, even when courage was the very thing their heart needed most. Stay until the end. Something even more meaningful is waiting ahead. As the night grew quieter, another memory surfaced unexpectedly. It was a simple conversation from long ago. Nothing dramatic happened during that conversation. No promises were made. No grand declarations filled the air. Yet every word now carried a different weight. They remembered the kindness they received when they least expected it. They remembered feeling understood without having to explain themselves completely. They remembered laughing freely without pretending to be someone else. For the first time, they asked themselves a question they had never dared to ask before. What if the safest place for my heart was never a place, but a person? That question settled into the silence like a gentle light spreading across a dark room. They tried to answer it logically. They failed. Because some truths belong to the heart before they belong to the mind. The hours continued passing, yet sleep never came. Instead, they found themselves reflecting on every path they had taken. They saw moments where fear had spoken louder than faith. They remembered opportunities they allowed to slip away because they believed there would always be another chance. They thought about words they wished they had spoken and kindness they wished they had expressed more openly. Each memory became another piece of a larger picture. A picture they had never fully understood until last night. My beloved child, life often hides its greatest lessons inside ordinary days. People wait for dramatic signs while overlooking the quiet moments that slowly shape their destiny. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the strongest memory. Sometimes one genuine smile outlives 1,000 impressive achievements. Your soulmate finally began seeing those quiet treasures with new eyes. Do not skip ahead. There is still one truth they have not fully admitted, even to themselves. As dawn approached, the first light touched the horizon. Most people would have welcomed the morning with relief after a sleepless night. But your soulmate felt something entirely different. They were grateful they had remained awake. If they had slept through those hours, they might never have discovered what their own heart had been trying to tell them for so long. Peace slowly replaced confusion. Hope gently replaced doubt. Not because every answer had appeared, but because they finally stopped asking the wrong questions. Instead of wondering whether hope was worth believing, they began asking whether fear deserved so much authority over their future. That single change transformed everything. Stay here. Do not leave yet. The most important part of last night's story has not been revealed. In the quiet moments before sunrise, they whispered another simple prayer. They did not ask for miracles. They did not ask for certainty. They simply asked for courage. The courage to be honest, the courage to listen carefully, and the courage to stop hiding behind old disappointments. There is remarkable strength in a heart that chooses honesty over comfort. As they opened their eyes once more, they noticed something they had overlooked countless times before. It was a small reminder connected to a happier season of life. Nothing extraordinary about its appearance. Yet extraordinary because of what it awakened inside them. Suddenly they understood why they had been unable to rest. The night had never been about losing sleep. It had been about waking up emotionally. Every hour of reflection had been preparing them for this realization. Every memory had been leading toward this single understanding. Every unanswered question had quietly pointed in the same direction. And still, one final piece remained missing. They knew they could not keep carrying these feelings in silence. They knew there were words waiting to be spoken. Words that had remained locked inside for far too long. Yet before those words could ever reach another heart, they first needed to understand one last truth about themselves. That truth arrived unexpectedly. Not through noise. Not through excitement. But through a quiet realization that left them completely speechless. The moment they understood it, they whispered only a few words to themselves. I have to explain what happened last night. Why those words escaped their lips, who they believe needs to hear that explanation first, and the unexpected decision they make after sunrise will change everything in ways neither of you could have imagined. And that is where the next part of this story begins. My beloved child. Do not move away yet. Remain here for a little longer. Every moment of this story has been leading toward a truth that neither heart was prepared to face. What happened after sunrise was not loud. It was not dramatic. Yet it quietly reshaped everything your soulmate believed about themselves. Stay until the end, because what is about to unfold carries the answer to the question that has been growing since the very first moment of this message. Morning arrived gently, but your soulmate did not greet it as they had greeted every other day. They stood beside the window watching the first rays of light stretch across the sky, feeling as though they had lived through an entire lifetime in a single night. The same streets were outside. The same sounds slowly returned. Birds welcomed the new day, people began their routines, and the world continued moving exactly as before. Yet inside their heart, nothing felt familiar anymore. The silence from the night had followed them into the morning. It was no longer an empty silence. It had become a peaceful one. There is a difference. An empty silence leaves a person feeling alone. A peaceful silence leaves a person feeling understood. That morning they realized they had finally stopped fighting against their own heart. Stay here. Do not skip this moment. Something even more meaningful is approaching. They walked slowly through the ordinary rhythm of the day, but ordinary things no longer felt ordinary. Every familiar place reminded them that life can change without anyone else noticing. They smiled politely at people they met, yet deep inside another conversation was unfolding, a conversation between hope and hesitation. Hope quietly whispered, "Tell the truth." Hesitation answered, "Wait a little longer." Hope replied again, "How much longer?" No answer came. Instead, another memory returned. This one was different. It was not about laughter. It was not about conversation. It was about a feeling. A feeling of peace they had experienced only a handful of times in their entire life. They suddenly recognized where that peace had first appeared. The realization stopped them completely. Sometimes people spend years searching for joy in distant places, only to discover that the deepest peace had already visited them through one meaningful connection they never fully appreciated. Your soulmate closed their eyes. The realization became impossible to ignore. This is why I could never truly let go. Those words remained inside their heart. No one else heard them. Yet heaven heard every syllable. Continue listening carefully. The story has not yet reached its greatest revelation. Throughout the morning they tried to focus on responsibilities. They answered messages. They completed small tasks. They smiled when necessary. But every quiet moment carried them back to the same thought. Last night had not been an accident. It had been an awakening. Not because everything suddenly became certain, but because pretending no longer felt possible. Every attempt to distract themselves lasted only a few minutes before another memory gently returned. One smile. One conversation. One shared moment. One unexpected kindness. Piece by piece, those memories formed something much larger than nostalgia. They formed understanding. Understanding became courage. Courage slowly became intention. And intention quietly prepared the heart for action. Do not leave now. The next part changes everything. Your soulmate realized there was one question they had been avoiding more than any other. What if explaining last night is not only for my own peace, but for someone else's heart as well? That question settled deeply inside them. It refused to disappear. The more they considered it, the stronger it became. Perhaps honesty was no longer optional. Perhaps explaining what happened was the only path toward peace. Not because explanations erase every uncertainty, but because truth deserves to be spoken with kindness whenever the time is right. As the afternoon approached, another unexpected moment arrived. A simple reminder crossed their path. Nothing supernatural. Nothing impossible. Just an ordinary experience that carried extraordinary meaning because of everything that had happened during the night before. They paused, smiled quietly, then whispered, "I understand now." Those 3 words changed the atmosphere around them. Not because circumstances instantly transformed, but because perspective did. Perspective often becomes the beginning of every meaningful journey. A changed heart sees familiar things differently. A hopeful heart notices possibilities where fear once saw obstacles. Stay until the end. One final piece is still hidden. As the day continued, your soulmate found themselves imagining a conversation they had rehearsed countless times inside their mind but had never spoken aloud. They imagined explaining the sleepless night. They imagined admitting the truth. They imagined saying that every attempt to ignore their feelings had only revealed how genuine those feelings truly were. Yet every version of that conversation ended the same way. Silence. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because some emotions become too meaningful for ordinary words. The heart understands what language struggles to describe. My beloved child, sometimes people believe they must have every answer before taking one honest step. But heaven often teaches the opposite. One honest step reveals the next. One act of courage creates another. One truthful conversation opens doors that fear kept closed for years. Your soulmate slowly accepted this lesson. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped demanding certainty from tomorrow. Instead, they chose honesty today. That decision became the quiet miracle hidden inside last night's story. Still, there remained one unfinished chapter. One explanation not yet given. One truth still waiting for the perfect moment. Late in the afternoon they reached for something they had avoided looking at for longer than they cared to admit. Their hands trembled slightly. Not from fear. From sincerity. They understood that after this moment there would be no returning to emotional distance. The walls around their heart had already begun falling one by one during the night. Now only one remained. The final wall. As they gathered the courage to remove it completely, an unexpected thought entered their heart. Not a command. Not a prediction. Simply a quiet realization. If I remain silent now, I may always wonder what could have happened. That realization became impossible to ignore. They took one slow breath. Then another. Then they made a decision they had postponed for far too long. A decision connected directly to the explanation they believe must finally be shared. What that decision is, why it fills them with both hope and nervous anticipation, and what happens the very moment they prepare to reveal everything that happened last night, is the beginning of the next chapter of this story.